Understand what black is. The source from which all things come. The security blanket for the stars. Understand what black is. It's not a color. It's the basis of all colors. It is not a complexion. It is a reflection of all complexions called human. And out of this blackness, passion flows like a river. Feelings tell the truth. Song and dance and making you laugh are family members. Understand what black is. The breath you breathe, the sweat on your brow, the cheers and the tears balancing the world on your head. Faith is the glue that holds us all together. This is your blackness, not some horror story.
You're listening to the Tom Ficklin Show on WNHH-LP 103.5 FM, your home for community radio.
Good morning, everybody. And that was Harry is our station manager for WNHH, and you're listening to the part of The Last Poets. And John Selders is with me, and we're here to talk about not being the last Mohegans or the last poets, but the new poets and the new Mohegans and the new Quinnipiacs. And so we're going to make this thing happen in terms of all lives matter, Black Lives Matter, and for today, tomorrow, and in the future. John Selders is with us, and John, rumor has it that you're assistant dean of students at Trinity College. Is that still correct?
That is still correct. I am.
Okay.
That's my day gig.
All right, and pastor at Amistad United Church of Christ there in Hartford. Is that still correct?
That is still correct.
And I'm told that your 24/7, 365 gig deals with really this. Some people might consider it a myth. Other people might consider it to be a reality. Other people might consider it to be just an aspiration. But something called the possibility of moral behavior. Rumor has it that you kind of illustrate that we can act as moral animals. Is that correct?
That is correct. I believe that we do have a moral instinct.
And so it's not only a belief, but I'm told that you have. I mean, here I'll be a little more sober now for the remaining 50 minutes. But you have literally put your life on the line for that belief, and people I don't think they really realize when people march, testify, fast, really publicly display their beliefs. There's always been crackpots in the world. So you, and I'm not obviously not wishing this on you, but you have placed your life on the line. I mean, other people have been shot for marching. People have been shot for just sleeping. Other people have been shot for just driving. So the crackpots in the world, you've been marching and involved with moral majority and moral Mondays and Reverend Barber. And even before Reverend, I believe, John, I haven't really researched you totally, but before even Reverend Barber ascended, so to speak, you were kind of active in things. Is that fair to say?
That is very fair to say. I've lived it. Some people ask me, and I tell them all the time, yeah, I've lived a fasted life, if you will. I grew up, I'm third generation, classically trained and mentored as a Pentecostal preacher. So that's been my family. I have the family business, if you will. My grandfather was in the same line of business, out there on the line, if you will.
Yeah.
So I am my dad, and then now me. So, and
is it fair to say that your hair was probably not as gray?
Oh my God, it wasn't. It certainly was not as gray. I used to look young. I used to be young.
I see. So again, we're going to chat with Bishop John Selders for the next 40 or 5 or so minutes, and Assistant Dean of Students at Trinity College here in when I say here, at the state of Connecticut, but in the city of Hartford. Pastor United Church of Christ in Hartford. John, how long have you been at the Amistad UCC?
I will celebrate 19 years in November. So.
See, tremendous. If time permits, people may not know or may say that hear the word Amistad or AMISTAD, may even not even know what that symbolizes or the reality of that connotation or where that word kind of emerged in our historical kind of memory. So we might take a moment on that as well before we close. And then let's talk about, let's drill down on this word moral and this organization you're involved with, and tie in, I believe you're involved with this is it this tomorrow or Wednesday with something with another rebel rouser, Shelley Best. I believe you're involved with something coming up. So let's talk about what this moral. You throw in the other words, because this is important.
Sure. I'll tell you this latest configuration of the work we're doing and centered here in the state of Connecticut. We were involved in the resistance movement coming out of August 2014, Ferguson. August 9, 2014, Michael Brown was shot and killed in the town of Ferguson, which is a neighboring suburb of St. Louis. I grew up in St. Louis. My wife grew up in St. Louis. My children were born in St. Louis. And I particularly was born in the town just west of Ferguson, the first African-American town incorporated in the state of Missouri. That town's name is Kinloch. It no longer actually exists today as a town. A town that had maybe 10 to 15,000 people in it now has less than 300 in the town. That town has been eminently domained and taken over largely by St. Louis Lambert International Airport, which is just west of where the town used to be. And so Ferguson was a town near and dear to me. And so during that period of time when the rebellion was high there, and the focal of what now has emerged as the Black Lives Matter and the movement for Black Lives, we were back and forth from here to St. Louis, involved and engaged. And it is out of that involvement and engagement, we came back to Connecticut and constituted ourselves vis-a-vis conversations. And more importantly, a small group of us began to devise as a means for activism, linking the movement for Black Lives and Black Lives Matter to the larger, broader social justice movement that had begun several years ago with our brother and friend, the Reverend Dr. Bishop William Barber. And that began what we now call Moral Monday CT.
All right. And so for someone's listening and want to join your cause, want to jump on the bandwagon, I don't say that sarcastically, wants to, because these, in some ways, the last month seems it could be perceived to be a fashion statement. You know, it's something to do. On the other hand, you've been involved with this before it was fashionable and when it was dangerous, and I anticipate you're being involved even when it might encounter more resistance. So if there's some allies or troops or new recruits out there that might be interested in finding out how to get involved, what should they do?
Sure, they should go to moralmonday.ct.org. That's our website, and we're on all the social media platforms. So if you just at Moral Monday CT, you'll find us and you'll find more information. The most up-to-date information is through social media. So Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram, you'll find kind of up-to-date live information. However, if you want to be involved, if you go to the website, you'll hover there just for a few seconds and you'll be asked to join and get regular updates from us, and you'll start to get them. We're active and engaged, and we'll be asking folk who are similar or like-minded to be more involved as we really push for change, in real change.
Well, see, now real change. Well, so you've teased me with that comment because you were recently on a fast. You involved, from my observation, involved with real change for at least the last 10 years. So what does that mean, John? I mean, you blowing up some buildings, or what does that mean, real change? Because literally, your fast, your marches, your protests, your petitions, your civic engagements. There's nothing on the planet. There's nothing in the list of civil discourse that you haven't done thus far. So don't tease me. Don't leave me hanging. What do you have in mind?
Well, what I have in mind and what I really mean when I say real change, as you intimated, Tom, lots of the activism now seems to be just cachet or symbolic, and I'm good with that. I'm a person of faith, so symbols are important to me. Flags coming down are important to me. Flags going up are important to me. Taking a knee was so important that the President of the United States spent more time talking about that than actual things of of state in regard to Colin Kaepernick. It cost him his job taking a knee. So, I think these things, what young people have asked law enforcement and other officials to do in taking a knee is important. And I think we also have to change some laws. And so what you've just referenced, just most recently, we've just come off an 11-day fast, calling for the governor and the legislature of the state of Connecticut to put their money where their proverbial mouths have been. That if you're going to open up the state for commerce, then open up the people's house, and then get back to business, the business of the people in this state. And so we asked for the governor and the legislature to come back into session, give us a date when they were going to come back into session. And we asked that faith leaders come join us and let's fast. Let's use the tools of our faith. Most faith communities have some version of fasting as a way for spiritual renewal and discipline. And it's also been a tool for political activism. And so we invoked that and had dozens and dozens of people across the state. In fact, we had people joining us across the country in this observance of a fast until we did get a date from the governor and from the leadership of the General Assembly, the state of Connecticut, to come back into session. And now the issue is what real, and let me also make the caveat, come back into session with the first order of business to be dealing with policing. It is clear to me this Black Lives Matter moment is about how and what we are doing in the United States around policing. And here in Connecticut, we are not immune. While our cases may not have national prominence at this point, Jason Negron, I can rattle them off, Mubarak Salome, just recently, within the last couple of weeks, we've had a case down in the southern part, down in your area, the southern part of the state of Connecticut, Manchester, Connecticut. We had a shooting in April of Jay Santos. So there are cases a year ago, Chulo Vega in Wethersfield. These cases, certainly not high profile like George Floyd or the other cases that are in the news, in the national news, but no more significant and no more heartbreaking for those families who are having to deal with the loss of a loved one who were unarmed in their encounter with police in the state of Connecticut. So we got a deal, and we've had a champion and champions in our state legislature around that. Gary Winfield, Robin Porter have led the effort. And so we've said to them, let's go. Let's change some laws. We even have a state's attorney who is right now on the hot seat because of the way she has ruled in these particular cases. And there are real, and let me say this as well, with the state's attorney, Gail Hardy, who I'm speaking of directly, she was able to point to state statutes in order to justify the position she took that said, I cannot bring formal charges against these police. They were acting in accordance to the law. So my position and our position has been, let's change the law so that we can no longer have people of authority use the law, to rule against what we believe. Again, you asked me to talk about what is moral. What is a moral outrage? The sheer fact in Trulo's case, that's the Wethersfield case a little more than a year ago, that a mere traffic violation turned into a fatality. I think something's very, very wrong with our system that allows for that to occur and nobody have any consequence. In fact, what has now happened, that officer has retired with full benefits. And probably when I'm just surmising at this point, but when the dust settles, we'll find another police department to sign on to and live out the rest of their career, which is what happened when that particular officer was involved in another shooting sometime earlier in Manchester, and then migrated over to Wethersfield. There's something wrong with our system, and so let's take a look at that. And I'm pleased to have the conversation, the robust conversation around defunding the police, abolition of policing as we know it, disarming and dismantling policing. I want to have that conversation. Now is the time.
John, shift for a second, because I want people to know that you're not working in isolation. Rumor has it you have kind of a national father figure and ally and friend, in the name of Reverend Barber. So let's talk about that connection, because it's important for people to know that sometimes we all feel that we're kind of despondent. I shouldn't say we all, but let me speak for myself. Sometimes I feel despondent and depressed. And in fact, John, I was so depressed this morning, I said I was about to call you that I'm not going to do the show. I'm not into it. Seriously, for full transparency. Yeah. But I said, let me just strap my boots on. And give you a call. So this is therapy for me. But talk about your connection with Reverend Barber.
Sure. I've known of Reverend Barber for a number of years. It's interesting to me when people land on the scene, and when I say the scene in a national way, many of us don't know that they've been involved in work locally and in their area for many, many years.
Yes.
Reverend Barber he's been a dear friend and colleague for a very long time, but from a distance. It was in and around the election of President Obama's second election. That's the 2012 campaign that I started to hear about some of the work that he and others were doing in North Carolina with the NAACP. He was leading the charge, and in particular, they were talking about voter suppression. That was the issue. As you may remember, by 2013, right after the 2012 election, the National Congress gutted the Civil Rights Act of the original Civil Rights Act of 1965. To which much of the teeth and the power and the strength of that act was really obliterated. And ultimately, redistricting, gerrymandering, and all kinds of other things that actually suppressed the vote of citizens in North Carolina and, in fact, throughout the South. And so Reverend Barber reached out to a number of us, and we began to have conversations in some broad ways around what we need to do. That what was happening in the South was also happening in the North, with far more, a bit more sophisticated. In that, for example, I'll say here in Connecticut, right now, there are formerly incarcerated folk who don't have, while on paper, have the right to petition to get their voting rights restored. Actually, that has never happened. All right. So we have a whole cadre of Black and brown people, because, of course, we are disproportionately more in line in and around incarceration and mass incarceration, what Michelle Alexander called the new Jim Crow. And so that's a way that voter suppression happens in places like Connecticut. And so we've been in that conversation for a long time. So when we started having the conversation around what to do here in Connecticut, in response to what we were gaining and involved with in 2014 around Black Lives Matter and the movement for Black Lives, it was very, very easy to pick up the phone and say, hey, brother, we want to work in this larger, broader context around not just voter suppression, but all of the broad sweeping ranges of social justice issues, because racism is still alive. White supremacy is still in operation and is the bed of much of the civil and social injustices that we are dealing with today. And so it's been ours to take a look at those broad, whether that's mass incarceration, whether that's education, whether that's in employment, whether that's the vote, and police brutality and overreach, to connect those dots, if you will, in a place like Connecticut and in New England. So we've been engaged and involved in what that looks like in Vermont, what that looks like in New Hampshire, of course, what that looks like in Boston and Springfield and Massachusetts, and even Providence got some drama going on. And we've been engaged in talking with folk over there. So there's a New England context to this that situates Connecticut in a broader conversation around social justice. And that's what we've been engaged in. Well,
John, so I appreciate that. I appreciate that eloquent soliloquy. I mean, I'm gonna get you on the Hartford stage at some point. But life is the drama. But I want you to kind of just let people know and share that almost for every Monday for the last what number of years you've been doing something. I mean, but I mean, talk about Moral Mondays.
Sure. So More Monday, this idea of More Monday CT and the work that happened out of North Carolina. More Monday actually literally started when faith leaders and clergy down in North Carolina showed up at the Capitol in Raleigh and just began to pray. And in their exercising of their faith, they got arrested. And what was a one-day action turned into a series of months of regular, what they call Moral Monday actions. And that was the beginning of the Moral Monday movement. That dates us back to 2013, early 2013. And so what we started to do is to link with that. And so Moral Monday, I ask people all the time, when do you think we're going to do a turn up? What day of the week do you think we might show up at something? And people start to giggle a little bit. And I said, no, because people, people question that. We have chosen Monday, the first day of the week, to show up for justice. And so it is a metaphor. Moral Mondays are metaphors then for what I think ought to be, the first work is to show up for justice in your first work at the beginning of your week, the beginning of your recognition that you are connected, not just as an individual, but you're connected to a broader community of folk and people. In fact, we're not built to be islands unto ourselves. We're built to be connected. Each of us has a mother and a father. We got aunties and uncles. And in my community, I got big mamas. And Pookies and Ray Rays that I am deeply connected to. My buddy and friend Cornel West says, I am somebody because somebody loved me. I am whoever I am because somebody loved me, paid attention to me, cared about me, wiped my behind when I couldn't take care of myself. And it is those folk that you see in me today. And so that's the connecting that I have. And our brother and friend, Reverend Barber is deeply committed to that work, and we are partners in the work together. In fact, he was consecrated a bishop several years ago, and I was part of the consecrating body, and I have that privilege. So we're connected in a spiritual way as well. I signed on to his documents as bishop. So there is a kind of I am his elder, if you will.
Amen. Amen. John, take me to this week. You and Reverend Shelley Bester, kind of, and possibly others, are being involved with an activity.
Yeah, we're going to have a conversation around activism. There's a film that's being premiered here, and we're doing it virtually. I love what we're doing now. We can't say we can't keep doing the work because Zoom and other platforms are allowing us to do the work in different ways. And I want to just make one statement that I believe we're in this time right now where things are not going to be the same. That we're not going to be able to go back to something. In fact, we're moving to something different. And I ask people all the time, if you would just slow down for a moment, can't you just sense that things have changed? Right? And some of us can remember because we've been through some catastrophes, right? That life changed after 9/11. Most of this current generation, some of these young people, they were not born or they were babies. Right? It's hard to believe that, but 9/11 was 20 years ago almost, and life changed. But I remember when HIV hit the scene in the 1980s and how life changed for many of us. I can remember. I remember when Dr. King was assassinated in 1968 in our communities, and life shifted and changed. So in many ways, because you lived through catastrophes, Katrina. You know, life changed for many folk after Katrina. That in this moment, life is going to change a bit. So I appreciate the technology giving us the ability to disseminate information. We're going to watch a film that is dedicated to John Lewis, who is the senior statesman of Congress and a stalwart, and for some of us, a hero. Yes. And then we're going to have conversation about what that means, how we connect that kind of activism, that kind of lifelong dedication that has led him from the front lines of the civil rights movement of the 1950s and 60s to the halls of Congress today. And that journey has not been an easy journey, and that has been met with and fraught with trouble and heartache and circumstances. I'm remembering him showing up for work in Congress and being spat on. Right? Just a few years ago. So the work is still in that way related to us and how that we can show up. I'm talking about these times now, Tom. I'm beginning to reference. I'm not real concerned with you being an activist, right? You can do whatever you want to do, but I am concerned about your activity. And to me, you can no longer be sitting in your siloed, isolated spot without showing some receipts. The young people call it receipts, right? You got to show up with some receipts. And I want to know, and I'm charging people, what is your activity? Talk to me about how you're connected. If in fact Cornel West is absolutely correct that we are whoever we are because somebody loved us, then so therefore we have a obligation and a responsibility in the context of community to show up in community just like folks showed up for us, right? The people who showed up for us, who risked whatever they risked so that we could have. No need of you sitting up there talking about, I'm not going to vote because they don't do nothing anyway, when people died so you can have the right to have that attitude that you have. So I want to talk about not necessarily your activism. So I'm not asking people to get out on the line and do whatever the things they think is risky that I do. That's the call that God gifted me. But you ought to be called, all right, and you ought to be responding to the call to be active, to be in movement, to be in collaboration and consultation with what are the issues of the day that you're facing, so that in fact you're obligated because you're not by yourself. You're not by yourself.
John, let me ask you
if that makes sense.
Well, we're going. If it doesn't make sense, we're going to have you back. To explain a little more. And you'll give us the epistemology and the existentialism, and we'll get you. We'll get you one way or the other. Take me. The thought that you just shared. If a young person was just listening to you, say a young person between 15 and 30, what kind of things would you want him or her to hear about their, not necessarily dedicating their life, but just living a responsible life? And even if you want to repeat what you just said, but for a young person between 15 and 30, what kind of keywords do you want them to kind of think about, debate, challenge you on, debate with you, embrace? What kind of key things do you want them to really digest in terms of their daily walk?
Sure. There is, I would call in each one of us, the existential questions. Philosophers and thinkers would characterize this in what they would call ontological meaning and being. What does it mean? What does my life mean? And I think each of us, in fact, are called to answer that question. Why am I here? What's the reason that I'm here? Is there a God? I mean, these kind of big old questions that we have, and often in times of quiet and reserve and conservation, these questions come up, and that we have to answer them in some ways. And we come up with those answers sometimes with some forethought, but oftentimes we just come up because we're just reacting in the moment, right? I would ask any person, but particularly this age group that you've named, to begin to think about why am I here, and what's the purpose for my being here, and to begin to get at what those purposes are, how I might then be of service to those purposes, and then thirdly, not only of service to those purposes, what may be my highest, what philosophers call, John Dewey in particular would talk about democracy, and how he characterizes democracy is, how do I participate in the highest good, not just my highest good, but our highest good, singularly and collectively. What's the highest good? If we are, in fact, engaged in that project, that ought to lead us to some inevitabilities, right? That ought to lead us to making decisions in relationship to where I might go to college, or what I might invest in as far as a career is concerned. How do I take care of myself and or my family as that begins to move and grow? Those are questions that I want to engage young people and old people, because, you know, ain't nothing so bad as an old young fool, if you know what I mean, right? So I think we all are, and in fact, we all are constantly reevaluating the choices that we've made, the decisions that we made, and that's not static. It continues to move. It continues to evolve, that we are in an evolutionary process. And life teaches us, quite frankly, that you have to go back again and make decisions again that you've made. You have to recommit. Sometimes you have to shift and change. Some of us have had midlife crises, if you will, and have had to reassess, why am I doing what I'm doing? And we go into a second or third career. For me, I've had 3, 4, 5 careers, all concurrently and simultaneously. So I've been in and out of different spaces and places. But that is called life, right? That is called life. My teacher and I call him Guru, Howard Thurman. He was he's known as a Christian mystic. He talks about the inner sea, and he says, I'm paraphrasing his short piece around this. He says that every one of us has has an island, and on that island there is an altar, and on that altar, on that island stands an angel with a flaming sword. And he says that angel with the flaming sword is there standing guard because on that altar we've placed the things that are most important to us. And that angel then is there to protect the highest, that which we value, but also to burn up stuff that's junk, right? So he calls that the seat of our inner consent. What he means is, let me speak in another kind of metaphoric, but I hope meaningful way. We've said yes to some things, whether we've done that very consciously or not. But we've said, this is what I will. This is what I've given my consent to, and it is that thing and it's fluid. Dr. Thurman said it is the fluid area of consent. It moves, it channels its own path. But in that moment, in these moments when we're reflecting what I've placed on that altar, what have I said yes to? What have I committed myself to? And where am I ultimately? What is the flow? Where am I going? How am I consistent with that? And there ought not be things that you placed on your altar that you haven't attended to, and that every decision you make somehow measures up to what you've said yes to, right? And if there are, and we're human, so what's consistent about human beings, we are consistently inconsistent, right? We're consistently inconsistent. So we are then required to assess what those consistencies have been and how we then measure ourselves, or at least I want to say judge ourselves, but I want to give us, I don't want that to be so pejorative. How do we evaluate ourselves and our choices based on those things we've placed on that altar and that we've given yes or consent to? Now, I know that's a kind of lofty, philosophical, somewhat preachy, some ideals, but I believe if you were to reflect for a moment, some of that makes some sense and may ring true for you.
No, I mean, you're right. So, but well, I mean, the way that you characterize that journey and the various ebbs and tides and vacillations and being in tune with how the wind is blowing is really important. Hold on to that and then connect it to you've been at Trinity for 4 years now?
I've actually been here 6 years. I've been in the role of dean for a couple of years, but I was here as a chaplain before. Connect
with what you just mentioned in terms of some of the counseling and conversations and interactions you've had with the young people, because it seems to me that feeds the paradigm that you've just elucidated like crazy, and gives you additional examples of just how fluid and the yearning that people have.
Yes. So
particularly the students.
So for me, everything I have done, or many things that I have done, have set me up. I feel like I got set up. God done set me up. In the interviewing process, I came to the dean's role in the dean of students office and in student affairs via the chaplaincy. All right, I was chaplain and preacher, chaplain, same thing, right? Made sense for me to step into this role on this campus after spending 12 years on Yale's campus at the Divinity School. So I taught for 12 years at the Divinity School, having my hand as a practitioner involved in the academy and in practical ministry, which was my particular role at the Divinity School at Yale. So coming from that to Trinity College was an easy transition. And when the opportunity arose to be considered for the role of dean, my boss, who actually, said, "Hey, I'd love for you to throw your hat in the ring, if you will. I have an eye toward you maybe doing this, but you got to say yes to it, right?" And as I reflected on it, and he suggested a couple of things. One, what I call pastoral care, he called student counseling and advocacy. Right? And that what we call these roles are different, but the actual function of those roles are similar. In fact, they are the same. And so it made sense to me then to be providing opportunities for students both to begin to think and chart their course in an academic setting, especially primarily a undergraduate academic setting. In this liberal arts environment in much the same way, and to begin to have these conversations. So what you asked, that age group from 15 to 30, well, I'm really involved from like 17 to 22, 23, 24, right? With individuals who are having to have these conversations, who are having to think these thoughts, many of them thinking them for the very first time. And in addition, many of them having to think not only for the first time, having to think about these things where their choices will actually make a difference in their lives, will set them up for success in their lives. Whatever the choices are, I believe that they will pivot from these choices into the trajectory of their lives. And so it makes sense to me to be having these conversations and quite frankly, people who are not in a liberal arts higher education setting ought to be having these conversations, ought to be engaged in it. And I feel like I'm in much of the same way that I'm doing this in the context of liberal arts higher education. I'm having the same kind of conversation in the broader community about what are the choices we are making? How are we setting ourselves up for the success of ourselves and our community in the context of the broader, larger community? What are the choices that we make today? Like about policing, for example, like about poverty, like about public education. You know, I'm a champion for public education and public education for Black folk and brown folk nationally. But let me speak right here in Hartford or in New Haven or in Bridgeport. They not work. It's not working. Something is very wrong. And so why not have conversations in a full, robust way? And what are the choices and the decisions that we can participate in, that we ought to be participating in? And I don't really care if it's not the agenda of the administrations, whatever they are. We can bring those conversations to bear because we can have those conversations. If in fact, in this experiment of a democratic, the democratic republic that the United States is in, that we are talking about representative voting and representation for us, then we ought to be voicing our opinions about what are values that we want to see in our systems. And it ought not be that a small segment of our communities have their needs met, while the vast masses of the rest of us are operating in nebulous, not getting it done. It's not happening for us. There's something wrong with that. And I believe we can make those decisions and be active. Again, here's my through line. We can be engaged in activity that allows for us to change our lives. I'm done with trying to make people change. I want to live the change I want to see and be in the world.
So you concur with Ibram Kendi about if you're on the sidelines, you're a negative, and you have to be an anti-racist. You just can't say that you're not a racist. You have to be an anti-racist.
I'm probably on toward that side of the aisle. I would probably use different language, but I'm on that side of the aisle. Yes.
John, we have about 12 or so more, but maybe 10 more minutes. I want to kind of just take a pause for a second. If you're comfortable with this question, I think it might be useful for people to hear, because there are people that don't believe in religion. But there are people that even believe that morality is an aspiration, and we're just human beasts. You know, dog eat dog, Darwinian thing. Share about, if you would, and I don't want to limit you in terms of the length of time you might need to answer this question, but it's been on my heart and mind to ask folks that have committed themselves to a religious belief. Do you recall your conversion experience?
I do. And I've had, let me be very transparent. I've had a number of conversions.
So,
yes. Great. Yeah, again, as I've suggested, I think this point of evaluating and making decisions and placing what is important on our altar, going back to my metaphor, using Howard Thurman and the in which sea, he calls that metaphor. Those points or moments, those significant transition or inflection moments occur often. Religiously, you can call those conversions, right? I'm walking down the road, I'm headed down a path, I've made a decision, and a thing happens that then I can now look back in hindsight and say, that's where my path or direction got changed, or better yet, got more focused and got a little bit clearer. I'll liken it to, since I'm in higher ed, I'll liken it to the path a student takes when they come to, say, Trinity College or Harvard or Yale or any college. You run in, you get some courses, and you get some courses under your belt. By the end of your second year, you're asked to choose to pick a major. Even if you got to make some decisions about the trajectory of your academic life in an undergraduate context. And so I would liken conversion, if you allow me to say that, in that way, and take it out of a religious frame, although it is for me, but take it out of that to say there are points at which you got to make some choices and some decisions, and then they have an impact. Conversion really, let me use a religious word: repent. To repent literally means, the word comes from a Greek word that means to change direction and to really go from one direction to the other direction, right? Almost in a 180-degree opposite way, right? Well, I think along that continuum, coming from one direction to another, are multiplicities, because it's three-dimensional. It's just not on one plane. It's all over the place. You can go. There are all kinds of ways and choices, and I believe there is a pull that each of us have. I call it, I referenced it early, I call it the moral instinct. There's a part of us that wants to, that was born to do what is right, what is righteous, what is good, what is for not only my good, but my family's good, my community's good, my state and country, my nation's good, the world's good. I believe we all have a sense or a pull or a pushing toward that good thing that we then cover up with fear and bias and conditioning, and all kinds of stuff gets in the way of that. But if we could, ferret it out, if we could spend some time, and there are techniques and tools, that are gifted to us. Religion has a set of those tools, but I think we have those in life to ascertain who we are and how we get to be in a settled, reflective space in order to make good decisions about ourselves, to respond to what is that thing that, what is my deep desire, right? We do it when we get married, or when we choose to get the rituals of our lives. When you go down to the DMV and get your driver's license, you made a choice to be more independent, to join the ranks of adulthood, if you will. When you graduate from high school, for us, we're dating ourselves a little bit. If you got that high school diploma, you done something. Now that standard may have changed, and you might need to get an undergraduate degree and maybe even an advanced degree in order for that to get a job and to be hooked. And set yourself up for being able to take care of yourself and your family. But whatever those things are, you have the opportunity. And I think, quite frankly, like in birthing, the natural order of giving birth, women who give birth have to go through travail. And travail is not easy. In fact, it is trouble, right? And yet, through travail, through the pain, through the trauma and drama a woman's body goes through, life comes through. And a thing that I learned, and a lesson that my wife taught me, is that our children, when they were born, before their birth into this world, they lived a whole lifetime in her belly. All right. And the transition point, what we call birth, meant they died to the life inside her belly. And so in some ways, and when you have trouble, when there's difficulty, these points are the places where I believe change occurs. In these troubles, you die to that thing to be birthed into a new thing. This COVID moment is offering, I know I'm being pretty highfalutin and philosophizing and religiously, I can't help it. I'm a preacher, but what I want to
just go past the collection plate at the moment.
That's right.
Cash App though, but you accept Cash App.
That's right. Cash App and PayPal. I mean, we hook it up. But I want to suggest that that's where the answers are. And to your question about what is moral? There is a point at which what is right for me, but not just for me, what is right for me and mine, right? Me and mine and my kind, which then means, and that the kind gets larger and larger and larger outwardly, right? It's me, my kind, my people, my nation, my community, my world, right?
John, that's tremendous. We have another 30 seconds that I really appreciate. Again, the people want to support, be involved, find out more about you and the movement. Where should they go?
moremondayct.org. That's our website, and at More Monday CT on all social media platforms. You'll find us and you'll see us. You'll see my face and my wife's face. We're co-founders of More Monday. Pamela Selders, I have to give her a shout out as well. We're partners together in the work.
Indeed. And next time we're going to have you and Pamela on.
All righty.
Just to talk about, we'll talk about a lot, but just couples and love for one another and our family unit, what I'd like to kind of lay on you. That's we're missing a lot there. John,
sure.
Thank you so much. It's been a pleasure to kind of chat with you. And
thank you, Tom. I appreciate it.
As you know,
All righty, man.
Okay.
Understand what black is. The source from which all things come. Security blanket for the stars. Understand what black is. It's not a color. It's the basis of all colors. It is not a complexion. It is a reflection of all complexions called human. And out of this blackness, passion flows like a river. Feelings tell the truth. Song and dance and making you laugh are family members. Understand what black is. The breath you breathe, the sweat on your brow, the cheers and the tears balancing the world on your head. Faith is the glue that holds us all together. This is your blackness, not some horror story of lost souls drifting into the land of perversion. Blackest love is a light shining on a path leading to the sun, or caressed